Welcome to the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. This is your go-to resource for personal growth, mastering communication, and influencing and persuasion techniques that will help you unleash the full potential of yourself and others. Here is your host, Alex Morgan.
Welcome to another episode of the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. My name is Alex Morgan, and I'm a master trainer of hypnosis and NLP. And on this episode, we're going to think about this main idea. Why do we just randomly assume things about people, and what happens when we stop? So I was speaking to someone, it must have been a few weeks ago now, and I was telling them about people that I know and how they reward themselves for goals. And when people started rewarding themselves for goals, maybe they started out really, really small. They would buy themselves their favorite meal, t-shirt, pair of shoes, something like this, because they didn't achieve huge goals, big goals, outrageous goals. And even one of my students, I asked him, what's something that you really, really learned when we're speaking about how to actually achieve things? And he said, design things and design experiences that you want that are so outrageous, because the mind will find a way to get them. So I was explaining to this person that you can start off small with rewards. And rewards install pleasure in your mind that when you achieve your goal, it's going to be exciting, you're going to be curious, and you're going to feel pleasure and motivation to achieve your goal. So I told them about someone who then started rewarding themselves with luxury cars, houses, one day wants to reward themselves with a yacht, and they started to assume that maybe this person was materialistic, or maybe that this person just wanted things and never knew when to stop. And I said, yes, I agree. You could be right. You could be right. I said, if we really want to know, though, why this person is doing what they're doing, then we need to ask them, why are they doing what they're doing? So if you think about it, can we really just assume anything about anyone? Because what if I was working with a client and I started to assume things about this person? And I was just assuming that whatever they told me was true. Whatever they told me was their real problem, their real thoughts, their real focus, their real reality. What if I didn't dig deeper? What if I didn't ask them more questions? If I didn't ask them more questions or think about how is that a problem for them and just assumed whatever they told me was their real problem, then I may not even help them. So if someone's going to pay me to help them create a different reality, I'm going to need to ask them more questions. I'm going to need to really figure out, what is their real problem? What is it that they're maybe not even consciously aware of at the time to know what their real problem is? And when they actually solve that, then that's the reason that they're going to get rid of any of their other problems. So let's think about some different reasons why we shouldn't assume things about people, why we should probably be curious, why should we be excited to learn more about others. The first one, you may be wrong. So in the first example, maybe that person I was speaking to, maybe they were completely wrong. At the same time, maybe they were right. Maybe there is a reason that this person is rewarding themselves with luxury items. Maybe they are a bit materialistic. Who knows? However, we have to ask the person why they're doing what they're doing, because that's how we'll know. So a lot of times we assume things about people based on partial information, or we make a snap judgment about someone. Something I like to do is when someone is saying something and they're talking to me and I'm asking them questions, and it doesn't matter if it's a client, I'm in a normal conversation, I'm meeting a new person, I'm working with someone, whatever it is, someone that I know in my family, I'm not just going to try to read into the lines of what they're saying or assume their whole entire background or their programming. I'm going to ask specific questions to uncover things. So I'm not basing my opinion on them based on partial information. Now, of course, when you first meet someone, you're not going to have all the information. You're going to have some partial information. However, continue to be curious, continue to be excited about other people, and this will keep you from making any assumptions or making any judgments. And think about it. Unless someone, you think they're a bad person or something like this, why would you really want to be wrong about someone and start assuming things? Because if you're assuming things, you may not get to know the person for who they really are. At the same time, do we really get to know people for who they are? Because if you think about it, so many things around us are a mirror of our reality. And we're never going to have all the information about the other person because we don't know completely how they're filtering their reality. We may know some things. We're not going to know every single thing. So we're not going to truly know each person for who they are, for everything they're programmed with. That would take a lot of time. So it's safe to assume to not make assumptions so we're not wrong, because we're always going to have some sort of partial information. However, get as much as you can before you start assuming different things. And this leads to the second thing, which is if we're just going to assume and not ask people why they're doing what they're doing and ask them different questions, it can also damage relationships. So this can cause conflict in friendships, at work, in business, with family, with any type of relationship. Have you ever assumed something about something that someone said, and all of a sudden you had conflict because you thought of something, and instead of just asking them, hey, you said this, how do you really feel, or what do you really think about this, or how do you think about this? It's really important to understand how people think. So if you can ask questions instead of assuming, you're probably not going to damage many relationships. Because most of the people that I like to be around people who are curious, people who are excited to learn new things. I'm open to anyone's perspective. And I find that it's easy to meet people when you go in with a state of mind thinking, I'm open-minded, I'm going to learn. Because you don't want to block yourself from current relationships and damage those. And you don't want to damage relationships before they even start. Because I truly think that we can learn something from everyone. Everyone has something to teach us. And that leads to the third thing. So if we're assuming things, it really gets in the way of curiosity and learning. So a lot of people think that the ultimate goal is to be happy. Have you ever been really, really happy for an extended period of time? Think about that. And if you have been, or maybe you are right now, or maybe you just want to be, think about just being happy all the time and what that's going to lead to. Now, there's some information out there now that shows that instead of thinking, I just want to be happy, why not think about being really, really curious and really, really excited? Because when you're really curious and you think about being curious all the time in your mind, and you can do that right now. You can think about a time that you were totally curious and notice what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt and really feel the feelings of being really curious. And I'm sure as you think of that time, staying curious, staying open-minded, it probably helped you grow. There were probably a lot of benefits then. So a lot of times when people mention something, you can just say, hey, tell me more about that. People like to talk about themselves. Have you ever noticed that? I notice that all the time. Even if you're talking to someone and they seem distracted, you can ask them what they're looking at, what's distracting them, why they're looking at that, how is that making them feel? And then you can tell them, tell me more about that. And then they won't be so distracted anymore. You'll see that people start to open up just because you told them to tell you more about what they're doing. People like to talk about what they're doing. So it's quite easy to find out why people are doing what they're doing. All you have to do is ask them. So stay curious, stay excited, have a willingness to learn. I'm teaching a training right now, and on the first day, when I tell a little bit about the history of what we're learning in the training and how it started and all of this, I say this leaves behind methods and a trail of techniques and lots of information. And if you really want to succeed at this training, there's two things that you want to do. You want to stay curious, be curious, have curiosity, be curious all the time in any interaction, because that's really how you're going to understand how people think. And the second thing that you want to do is you want to have a willingness to experiment. So this means to be flexible in your behavior. And if you're flexible in your behavior in any interaction, that means you probably have really good mastery over how you feel internally. Because have you ever talked to someone and they were really nervous? You probably felt a certain way. Have you ever talked to someone and they were really confident? You probably felt a certain way. So think about if you talked to everyone and you were really curious and you were excited and you even told them, look, I'm really curious about you. I'm really excited to meet you. I just want to learn different things about you. They would probably be pretty curious and excited to speak to you as well. And that means that you also have a willingness to experiment when you're asking different questions, because you're willing to hear things about this person. Really interesting, isn't it? So be curious, have a willingness to experiment. That's how you're going to grow. And the next one is, if you're just assuming things, then it's probably hard to really feel how other people feel or notice how they're feeling or get any information on this. If you're assuming things, you're probably skipping over what actually happened or someone's experience, how they felt about something. What were the events that led to them feeling that way or experiencing their reality in this way? So if you think about it, have you ever talked to someone and you ask them a few questions and all of a sudden you felt really good inside? You just felt like, maybe I know this person. And then maybe a little later, the person actually told you, you know what? It feels like I know you my whole life. It feels like I've known you forever. Or you remind me of a friend of mine. Are you sure we haven't met before? So when you listen and you don't assume anything, this actually builds connection. Now, one of the places that I hang out, we have open discussions, and a friend of mine actually calls them social meetings. And the whole purpose of a social meeting is to share perspectives. And you can build connection here with people because we talk about various things, and it doesn't matter if we agree or we disagree. It's all about hearing perspectives. So even if someone comes and they're really trying to prove their point, and maybe they're assuming things, we say, look, we agree with you. And just so you know, here, what we're doing is we're having an open discussion. So we're willing to hear all perspectives. And when we say something like this, we tell them we agree and let them know we're willing to hear all perspectives. People want to share even more information. They want to share more perspectives. It doesn't matter if we agree or disagree with this person. What matters is they know that they feel hurt. And let's say they're talking about one of their problems. People start to heal when they feel heard. So even if someone's sharing a problem, a story about their life, I'm sure it's really helpful for them if they feel heard. And I'm sure you felt that before. You were hanging out with some different people and you were sharing different things about your life and maybe a difficult situation or maybe something that was a really big win for you. You were so successful. You achieved something you always wanted to do. You really just achieved one of your dreams, for example. And think about it. If people were listening and they were genuinely curious about what you're saying, whether or not it was something good or bad that happened, and good or bad, that's all up to things anyway. It doesn't really matter if it's good or bad. Maybe you saw it as bad and maybe they saw it as good, or you saw it as good and they saw it as bad. I'm sure that when you felt heard and people were listening, I'm sure this made you realize that, look, some sort of connection is building here. And it felt really, really good. And the last one that I'm going to go over is if you're just assuming things, it kind of keeps people in a box. Doesn't really expand their thinking or your thinking. So people, I think we're truly here. The purpose, one of the purposes that we're here, maybe the main purpose, is we're here to connect with other people. And we're here to grow together. And we're here to achieve things, solve problems, share perspectives, and learn about each other. Because why else would a bunch of humans be here? So if we can evolve together, it's actually going to be much easier when you're evolving to evolve around people who also want to evolve. So if you're around people who are more stuck, stagnant, and have that kind of energy, it's going to be more difficult to evolve. So if we're not assuming things, then we're opening up the energy, opening up the space for everyone who enters our reality to show them, look, you can change, you can evolve, you can grow. And I'm sure that feels much more like freedom, doesn't it? So start to think about, when's the last time you assumed something? And who in your life, who in your reality, who do you know, or maybe someone you don't know? What if you asked them more questions? Said, just tell me more about that, instead of assumed. So who right now could you ask something instead of assuming something that they told you already, and just learn more about them and notice how that kind of deepens the connection that you already have. So throughout this week, when you're speaking to people, make a habit of asking at least one more question before you draw a conclusion. Even if you think you have all the information that you need, because I'm a firm believer in, especially when we're selling or interacting with people, we're never going to have all the information, and we don't necessarily need all the information to make a decision. However, even if we make a decision, let's not assume, let's be curious. And we can agree, be open-minded, and all of that. So ask one more question before you assume things about people. Because assumptions and assuming, that's easy. Being curious, having an open mind, being excited about learning more, this is where you grow. And I'm sure that's what you want to do now. So I definitely appreciate you listening to this episode. You can go ahead and share this with someone who will benefit. This will really help get the podcast in the minds of so many others. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next episode.